Remember me! Remember me! Remember me! Yeah, it's definitely big, all right. I just wonder if it's too big, you know? I mean, are people gonna be remembering me or the statue? Woody!
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pharaoh suddenly died.
Yay!
In my last video, I mentioned listening to the Lotus Sutra, because that's the sort of pretentious little squid that I am. But I've noticed a whole lot of the sutra is the Buddha saying over and over again how great the sutra is, and how you should copy it down and share it with all your friends, like an 11-hour chain letter. Apparently, by sharing these lines, I've earned myself immeasurable merit, and in my next life, my sense organs will be totally revamped. This makes me think about the relationship between religion and memory, and that makes me think about Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua 4. You should read this book. It's fun, and I'm not going to do it justice. 4 trains to win the 2006 American Memory Championship, and along the way, he talks about medical case studies, the history of memory, and what it means to be alive. Let's start with S, anonymous communist? And memory wizard, who in fact had trouble forgetting. When S wanted to memorize a list, he'd mentally wander around Moscow, leaving images where he could find them later, and when it was time to remember, he'd wander back to recover them in his mind's eye. On the rare occasion he forgot something, he'd have an excuse like, well, I forgot to get eggs because I put my mental egg on a white fence where it blended in, and I walked past it without noticing. But S wasn't limited to memorizing objects with convenient images, like eggs. He also had synesthesia, so unmemorable items, like numbers, became, in his mind, associated with items which were memorable. Quotes 4, 7 is a man with a mustache, he says. 8, a very stout woman. As for the number 87, what I see is a fat woman and a man twirling his mustache. Joshua 4 and other memory athletes have ordinary brains like you and me. They aren't born thinking like S. Instead, they purposefully cultivate the same mindset and tools. Ed Cook, English Grandmaster, tells 4, it was simply a matter of learning to think in more memorable ways, using the extraordinarily simple 2,500-year-old mnemonic technique known as the Memory Palace, which you might remember from the BBC show Sherlock or NBC's Hannibal. Ed Cook teaches 4 to fill his memory palace with a sort of artificial, self-imposed synesthesia. For instance, competitors in the American Memory Championships are tasked with memorizing the order of a shuffled deck of playing cards. Humans didn't evolve to do that, so in preparation, memory athletes translate the task for their caveman brains by assigning each card a person doing an action to an object, like Batman throwing a batarang at the Joker, or a cow pooping on a daisy, or your mom tucking into bed a baby. Then, on game day, each 3 cards of the shuffled deck are chunked together, so the first person does the second action to the third object, creating a bizarre, unforgettable situation. It's hard to remember King of Clubs, 2 of Spades, Queen of Hearts. It's easy to remember Batman pooping on a baby. Put that Batman on your front doorstep, and fill the rest of your house with the rest of the ridiculous images the deck has to offer. Then, remembering the order of the cards is as easy as remembering a wacky, surreal tour of your home. After some practice, I was able to memorize a deck of cards in under 15 minutes. The world record is under 15 seconds. The precise choices of persons, actions, and objects are essential. 4 explains that because images must be maximally memorable, they have to appeal to your own interests, becoming a good guide to the gremlins that live in someone's subconscious. Remembering these images quickly and accurately requires looking deep into them with every sense organ. Ed Cook recommends spending meditative time with each character. Ask yourself what they look, feel, smell, taste, and sound like, how they walk, the cut of their clothes, their social attitude, their sexual preferences, their propensity to gratuitous violence. Thanks to our caveman brains, some images are more memorable than others. 4 reports, When forming images, it helps to have a dirty mind. His own person-action-object system tormented him by putting his grandma in raunchy scenarios just so he could remember the Eight of Hearts. I explained my predicament to Ed. He knew it well. I eventually had to excise my mother from my deck, he said. I recommend you do the same. Yeah. Ed Cook and his fellow memory athletes seem a tad obsessed? Take this quote from Ed. My philosophy of life is that a heroic person having memorized enough poetry should be able to withstand about 10 years in solitary confinement without getting terribly annoyed. I figure you can squeeze at least a day's fun out of each hour of memorization, if you should ever happen to find yourself in solitary confinement. Our author acknowledges the possibility for this obsession to arise in himself. At the end of the book, Four says he wants to quit the memorization racket because he worries it's addicting. Given Four's history lessons about memory, especially in the context of religion, this addiction or obsession seems like a legitimate concern, because it goes way, way back. The techniques used to memorize a deck of playing cards are a throwback to a time before text, the time of oral traditions. Once upon a time, says Four, memory was at the root of all culture. Aborigines and Apache Indians independently invented forms of the memory palace method, but instead of using buildings, they relied on the local topography to plot their narratives, and sang them across the landscape, so myth and map were coincident. In India, an entire class of priests was charged with memorizing the Vedas with perfect fidelity. In pre-Islamic Arabia, people known as Rawis were often attached to poets as official memorizers. The Buddha's teachings were passed down in an unbroken chain of oral traditions for 4 centuries, and for centuries a group of hired tape recorders called Tanaim, literally reciters, memorized the oral law on behalf of the Jewish community. Humans didn't always have ways to externalize memory, like painting or writing things down or making Wikipedia articles. Facts about the world had to be transmitted brain to brain. But even after writing was invented, it didn't immediately replace memory. It became another tool for memory. Once upon a time, says Four, every literate person was versed in the techniques Ed was about to teach me. They had to be. Monks couldn't guarantee they'd see any book ever again. When you had the chance to read one, you had to make it count. One didn't just memorize texts, said Four. One ruminated on them, chewed them up, and regurgitated them like cud, and in the process became intimate with them in a way that made them one's own. Across the globe and throughout human history, memorization has always been invaluable for understanding the world. You had to fit a private Wikipedia in your head. If this wasn't applied to a literal religion, it would quickly become one. Four says 1500s Italian philosopher Giulio Camillo hoped to make a physical memory palace, an amphitheater full of paintings over boxes of cards on which were written everything. Camillo was convinced that there were images that could encapsulate vast and powerful concepts about the universe, and simply by memorizing those images, one would be able to understand the hidden connections underlying everything. Four also mentions Dominican friar Giordano Bruno, who promised that his art will not only help the memory, but also all the powers of the soul. Memory training for Bruno was the key to spiritual enlightenment. Hearing stuff like this, it's not so hard for me to empathize with ideas like ancestry worship. Humans have this need to remember everything they can about their world, and leave detailed notes so that it stays remembered forever.
Hey, you spend your whole life building a guy's toe, you're gonna remember him.
Says Four, we're all just bundles of habits shaped by our memories. When we die, our memories die with us. In a sense, the elaborate system of externalized memory we've created, called culture, is a way of fending off mortality. Given the long history and importance of memory, the assignment of persons, actions, and objects to playing cards sounds like a tiny little micro-religion in and of itself. In the final round of the 2006 American Memory Championships, Four and his opponent are each given a deck of cards in the same order. When 4 wins, it's like his card-to-image system is vindicated as a better way to turn an external reality into internal stories. 4 ends the book saying no long-lasting joke, invention, insight, or work of art was ever produced by an external memory. Not yet, at least. Essentially human acts depend on memory. That makes memorization sound so important, I'm kinda existentially terrified. Am I remembering things right? Will I be remembered right? Those memories are all I really am. But that's just me thinking too much again. It's all I do here at Thinkster. Let's go easy on ourselves. The night before the competition, Ed Cook emailed 4, all you have to do is savor the images, and really enjoy them. So long as you're surprising yourself with their lively goodness, you'll do just fine. Don't at any stage worry. Take it easy, ignore the opposition, have fun. I'm proud of you already. So don't take the world too seriously. Nothing lasts forever, not even in memory. But what makes it all worthwhile are the sights we see or make along the way. Remember to subscribe.